Hey everyone, it's Seth. Today we're going to be reviewing our Humminbird sonar. So we've got two units located on the boat, one kind of in the middle of the boat here, and then one that's up at the front. Kind of like all things electronic, the first step is going to be taking this cover off and starting it up. They will have a little bit of a boot time, but yeah, just be aware of that. This one we're actually going to start in a simulation mode, so it's going to simulate that we're on a lake out in Alabama or somewhere. Now that we've got our sonar on, it's in the simulation mode, so it's actually showing like we're out on a lake in Alabama somewhere. But we're going to walk through all the important views we need. This chart mode, which it says right up in the top corner which mode you're in. You can also find it in this little tab. It'll get us to all of our different views. The ones that are going to be most important are chart, which is right here at the top, and then side imaging are basically what we're going to use the most. This chart view is going to be most important for the boat operator. It's what they're going to use to actually navigate, to try and do a grid pattern. And then the other person on the boat will be using this display up front to actually look at the side imaging, which is what we will use to try and spot bodies, any areas of interest, and mark points such as last seen point, enter GPS coordinates, all that sort of stuff, so that we have some guidance on where we're actually searching. So going back to chart view, as we're moving through it, you can zoom in or out, and that's going to be this plus and minus at the top here. You can also use this dial to do the same. It's going to give you some topographic features if the lake's actually uploaded into the Humminbird sonar technology. Some of the smaller lakes around Loveland might not be, but something like Boyd will have a lot of these topography and swim beaches, all that sort of stuff. The other thing to note is that we are able to mark locations very quickly by hitting mark. So if it is, hey, the boat's at a last seen point, we can click this mark button right here. We can create a waypoint, and then we can mark it using these icons and colors however we want. So if it's a super strong hit, maybe we want to use red and some sort of symbol. That waypoint's now locked onto the screen, and we can use it in the future by clicking on it to actually navigate to it. We can create grid lines around it. It's now in our system, and both of these displays will be able to see that waypoint because they're talking to each other via Bluetooth. So we will have two people with eyes on it instead of just this person being able to see the waypoint. Moving on, we'll go to our side imaging. So side imaging, I'm actually going to attach another video that's on YouTube that Humminbird put out on what side imaging is. Basically, we have our transducer off the back of the boat, and it's putting out sonar at whichever frequency we select to provide an image that bounces back to that transducer and creates what we're seeing here. So in this particular case, we're kind of looking at a simulation of a boat that's traveling about 8 miles per hour in about 40 feet deep of water. And so this water column, that's basically the 40 feet to get to the bottom, and then we're scanning out to the side here. And as we're moving along, we're seeing all these features and shadows. So over here, if I select this area and hit the plus button, I can zoom in, and it looks like we've got some fish in that area. Versus if we scooch over to the side, there's a lot of straight lines, so it could be some sort of artificial structure, maybe something down at the bottom. It could just be sticks, but you can see all these shadows it's creating. Very similar to like a human shadow when the sun's hitting you. You don't see, or you'll see the shadow behind you. Same thing's happening with the sonar. And this can kind of help gauge maybe how large the object is, if it's casting a really large shadow, or if it's a really soft, small, broken shadow, it could be something little like bait fish. Some other things that are important for our side imaging is that you, as the person looking at side imaging, want to make adjustments for whatever helps you see the best. So just turning the dial up here, that's going to affect sensitivity, which as you can see is almost like brightness. It could help you actually spot shapes a little better depending on where that's at. And then also, totally just dependent on who's actually using the tool, is this dynamic contrast. So within this, you can decide which sort of color scheme you want, whether blue's easier for you to see, green, it's all up to whoever's interpreting this data as we move. Again, like I was showing earlier, if we do have points of interest, you are able to just touch the screen, or you can always move the cursor with this little joystick here as well. But if you see something that's interesting, let's say that, oh, I'm kind of concerned, I think there might be somebody right there. Again, we can use this mark button, create a waypoint. I'll go ahead and make this one purple with that symbol. And now we've created this new waypoint, waypoint number 2. And even though we created it in side imaging, if I go over to chart, we're able to see it there. So now, even though we were in a totally different view, it still recognizes where it was when we marked it in the side imaging view. So now we can actually drive to it, get another look at it, put our grid lines over it, do all the things we need to try and locate a victim using these waypoints. While we're on that subject, to actually create the grid lines, we're gonna zoom in over that waypoint we just created. And to access all the settings for whatever view we're in, we're gonna click it in the top left corner. So right now we know we're in our chart view. So we click chart. I'm gonna go to info, and then I'm going to create a trolling grid. So it's this 4th option right here. The grid size, it's gonna be how far apart these lines are that we're using. What's important about that is based on how far our side imaging is set, is we want to overlap our boat pattern and what we see when we're creating these grid lines. So if our side imaging is looking out, let's say 40 feet, if we have a grid size of, at least 25, let's say 30 feet, if we're able to boat a really good pattern, they should overlap, and that'll prevent us from not seeing or missing anything while we're searching. So I'm gonna set it for 50 feet right now. I'll hit set grid, and it should create it. So right there you see it's been created. And now, as we're driving our boat, as we drive, we create this red line. So we'll actually approach the grid, and then we'll try to drive right over it. It is really difficult to create a perfect pattern, especially depending on conditions, but you want to do it as good as possible, again, so that you have overlap, you're not missing anything. And then one thing to note is, let's say we're doing an east-west pattern. You want to go all the way past the grid, because when you turn, the side imaging is going to experience either compression or elongation, depending on if it's an inside turn or outside turn relative to the transducer. But as you come back, you're going to want to do the same thing, big overlaps. And then just as importantly, even if you didn't see anything and you did the whole grid this way, you're going to then want to do it north-south as well, because you could get a totally different view depending on where the body's at, if it's up against any sort of structure or vegetation. Getting those different views from different angles is going to be really important in a search. Other things to note is that when you are driving the boat, we want to stay usually 3 to 5 miles per hour. That's going to give us the best image when we are in side imaging. So we'll kind of jump back to that. And then using this side imaging, if something does pass us, we can always scroll back to it and look around. We do have some other little features. When we're using this cursor, it's going to show how deep and how far away from the boat it is using this these readings right here. So if we're looking at something, let's say, I don't know, just some arbitrary points here. Well, if I see, let's say this is what looks like maybe ahead of somebody, and we see we're at 30 feet, 20 feet, and then I scooch over and this looks like the legs. Well, okay, now all of a sudden I see that that thing's 12 feet big. That's probably not a human. Or it's 4 feet big. That sounds a lot like the person that we suspected went under the water. These are all little tools that we can use within this to try and help better our search. For basically any screen that you're in, it's going to say which one it is at the top left, and clicking on that will also kind of give you your settings from there. So sensitivity, contrast, these are all things that will help you see better. But with side imaging, the other thing that's important is understanding our range and how far out to the side of the boat that our side imaging is actually looking. So right now it's set to 102 feet. So on each side here, this is actually going 100 feet out to the side. So if we're looking for a 6 foot tall body, that's going to be a very small proportion of that. So a lot of times it's going to be beneficial to drop that range to something smaller. Like here, you can see I dropped it to 32 feet, but now the problem that we're having is the waters, or the depth is actually greater than 32 feet, so all we're seeing is water column. We're not actually getting to the bottom. So somewhere in between those two, so if I bump it up to, let's say 60 feet, sorry, give me 1 second. Actually, this is a good opportunity. The other way to adjust this is to use the minus button right here, and now you get a bigger slider, so I won't mess it up as bad. So let's say we set it to about 70 feet. Now we can actually see the bottom, and it's actually at a better range for us to spot someone. The other thing, which we usually won't ever need to touch, is the actual frequency we're acting at. So sonar lower frequencies are going to reach a lot further, but it's going to give a more distorted image. This Humminbird mega chirp, it's got all the fancy settings. Just keeping it in this mega setting is going to give us really good feedback that we can then adjust and see really well with, rather than going to those low settings. There's maybe potential if we're somewhere deep like Carter Lake and trying to search deeper than 60 feet or so to use the lower frequency, but I'd say it would be totally safe to just leave this in the mega setting. Just a quick touch on some of the other views that we have. I know I've kind of stressed this side imaging view and then chart, which is mainly used by the driver, but we do have a down imaging view as well. It's not one they really recommend we use. It's great for fishing, but in terms of spotting a body, it's not going to give you the greatest return. As you see, there's a lot of different features that could be anything, and that side imaging provides that sonar shadow that really does help us spot someone. The amount of color that we see here is basically how hard the return is. So it might show whether it's muddy and loose and softer, or if it's a rock, it's going to be a really hard return that's brighter color. The other one that's very similar to this, so that was the down imaging, DI. We also have 2D, which is essentially the same thing, just in a different color format. And especially fishing wise, it's really great seeing all these returns of fish and spotting them. But again, not a ton to go off of. So in terms of what we're going to use during our boat operations, basically chart if you're at the front driving the boat, and then the side imaging, which just understanding how to change those settings so that we're optimizing our potential to see someone is what's going to be important. So if you guys get time, definitely go out on the lake, play with these settings, see what you can see, and if you're able to put something in the water to try and find, it would be super beneficial, because it's kind of tough to see until you've actually seen a good amount of pictures. Okay, so one last thing that we want to make sure is that each of the sonar units are connected together. There's going to be times where, let's say we're in side imaging on this mid-boat unit, and we're not getting any image right here. It might not be connected to the other sonar, which is connected to the transducer. So what we need to do is click our home setting, cancel that, home, settings. At the very top, we have chirp sonar right there, and we're gonna look at sonar source. So what you can see right here is it says on for this Solix 10 MSI G3. You can kind of see that it's showing that all these little units are connected rather than this unit on its own. So we want remote units activated. So if you're not seeing side imaging, go to settings, chirp sonar, side imaging, and let's make sure that we have the Solix 10 MSI. Thanks for watching.